York is known for sometimes having extreme weather. So where do New Yorkers go for the most up-to-date weather forecasts? They watch their favorite TV weatherman, Mr. G.
Hi, I'm Mr. G. I'm the meteorologist at Channel 11 here in New York, WPIX-TV, and also CBS Radio in New York. So I'm in charge of telling a story, building a drama of cold temperatures, wind chill factors, snow on the ground for 35 days. For the 19th time this season, flakes are in the air. It's been snow to sleet, it's been sleet to snow, it's been snow to sleet to rain, it's been raining on Long Island, sleeting in the cities, snowing in the suburbs. I want to build up this story to announce what people don't want to hear, another possible snowstorm. The polar vortex is back. More on this later on. Does a cold winter mean a warm summer? No, it's folklore.
So how do New Yorkers handle all this bad weather news?
Certain kind of weather affects people. I mean, it's been a winter where snow's been on the ground a long time. That affects people. I think people have been indoors a lot. But New Yorkers are a tough group. I think people want to connect, and so weather's a great way to connect. Whether you're single and you want to meet somebody, talk about the weather. Whether you want to complain, talk about the weather.
And even though the weather may not be getting any better, the technology we use to predict it is.
When I first started the business, it was 72-hour forecast. As the science progressed, now everybody sees a 7-day forecast. Well, what you're going to see in 2 years is a 10-day forecast. And when my daughter grows up, it will be a 30-day forecast.
So what makes for a great TV weatherman?
Connecting is a big part of the job. The people know the weather. They get it on the computer. They get it on the app. 32% of the audience between 10 and 11 o'clock in New York City watches the news, which means to me that they still want to get it from somebody they trust. So they watch Mr. G for a reason. I still haven't found out that reason, but I know I work hard to tell a good story every night.
Did you get enough sleep last night? I didn't, nor the night before. These days, lots of people have trouble getting a good night's sleep. Insomnia, the inability to get to sleep, is now a major issue for many people. In Britain, over half of the adult population often struggle to fall asleep. And 10% of people regularly take sleeping pills. Even when people do get to sleep, they often sleep badly. Some people even struggle with sleeping disorders. These range from the common to the bizarre. Common sleep disorders include sleepwalking and somniloquy, also known as sleep talking. Stranger disorders include sleep paralysis, where people wake up unable to move, and exploding head syndrome, where people hear a loud noise like a bomb just before they sleep. In order to combat these sleep disorders, we need to understand more about sleep's effects. The problem is, sleep is still a mystery. I've come to the sleep unit at the Surrey Clinical Research Centre to meet the scientists who are trying to find out more. These scientists all study sleep. Instead of laboratories, they have bedrooms full of high-technology equipment. These machines measure a person's brain activity and body movement during sleep. Scientists use these measurements to analyse people's sleeping patterns. They hope to discover what sleep is for and what happens to us when we don't sleep enough. We already know that sleep deprivation affects the part of the brain that controls our behaviour, our personality, and our emotions. So when we don't get enough sleep, all of these things are affected. But why are we so sleep deprived? Researchers here say that we are sleeping enough hours, but that our sleep patterns are more irregular. The average adult sleeps for about 7¼ hours per night. This is almost exactly the same amount of sleep our ancestors used to get over 100 years ago. The difference is, they slept for just over 7 hours every night, but we don't. Our sleeping patterns have changed to fit modern life. Today, most people lead busy lives, and we often sleep less during the week. Sometimes we only sleep for 5 or 6 hours because we stay up late to work or spend time with friends. Then, at the weekend, people spend longer in bed and can sleep for 10 hours. Perhaps this irregularity in sleeping patterns is something our brains find difficult to get used to, and this in turn affects our health and general well-being. That's why sleep clinics like this one are trying to learn more, so we can all sleep a little easier.
Hi, I'm in Southwark, in London. This area used to be the site of one of London's oldest hospitals, St Thomas's. St Thomas's was here for almost 700 years and had one of the country's first ever operating theatres.
Have you ever had an operation? If you have, it was probably in an operating theatre like this. These modern theatres are clean, spacious, and bright. As you can see, they are full of high-tech equipment. And they are designed to make surgery as clean and as safe as possible. They usually have an adjustable metal operating table in the center of the room. Above the table, there are several large fluorescent lights, which allow surgeons to see everything. At the head of the table, there's an anesthetic machine, and around the room there are various monitors, measuring heart rate, blood pressure, and blood oxygen levels.
But what about old operating theatres? What were they like? Well, that's why I've come here. You see, St Thomas's old operating theatre used to be in the attic of this church.
The hospital was moved from here in the 1860s. But when a historian decided to investigate the church's old attic, he found a large abandoned room containing some old-fashioned surgical equipment.
Today, this room is part of the Old Operating Theatre Museum. The museum has been teaching visitors about the history of surgery for over 50 years.
The first question many people ask when they come here is, why is it called an operating theatre? Well, the answer is simple. As you can see, medical students used to stand here and watch the surgery, like an audience watching a play in a theatre. During operations, the room was always cramped and crowded, and the bigger and bloodier the operation, the bigger the audience.
Imagine how frightening it must have been for the poor patients. And they were usually quite poor. The rich had their operations at home, but the poor would tolerate the audience in order to receive surgery they would never be able to afford otherwise.
The patient would lie on this uncomfortable wooden bench while the surgeon worked. There was no anesthetic, so patients were awake throughout the procedure, unless, of course, they fainted. The surgeons were quick. They could amputate a leg in less than a minute, but they had very little understanding of hygiene.
There were no antiseptics, and surgeons always wore the same coats, which were usually covered with blood from previous operations.
They often used dirty instruments, which were kept on this old wooden table, and they rarely washed their hands. Below the operating table, there was a wooden box filled with sawdust or wood shavings. This collected the blood from each operation. But often there was too much blood, so in the end they built a false floor. the blood could be washed away and collected in the space between the new floor and the original floor. In such unhygienic conditions, it isn't surprising that patients often died during surgery. After the patient's death, their bones and organs were kept for further study.
All of these practices seem primitive to us today, but without these techniques, we might never have developed the cleaner, safer procedures we have today. That's something we can all be grateful for.